Commander Park Jinwoo rubbed his tired eyes as he walked through the dimly lit corridors of the EU's Thunderstrike. It was 0300 hours ship time, and most of the crew was asleep. The massive battleship drifted silently through the outer edges of the Sol system, conducting routine patrol sweeps for asteroid miners and cargo haulers. Park had been in the Earth Defense Force for 15 years. He'd fought pirates in the asteroid belt, defended mining colonies from raiders, and even faced down a few alien scouts who got too curious about human space. But tonight felt different. Communication Bay had been picking up strange signals, all weak fragments of transmissions from deep space that made no sense. "Commander, you need to see this." Lieutenant Kim Soyoung's voice crackled through his comm unit. She sounded shaken, which was unusual for the normally composed communications. Officer Park quickened his pace toward the communication bay. The Thunderstrike's corridors hummed with the familiar sounds of a ship in space, the low thrum of fusion reactors, the whisper of air recyclers, the distant clank of maintenance robots doing their endless work. These sounds had become like a heartbeat to him over the years. When he entered the communication bay, he found Kim staring at her console with wide eyes. The room was filled with banks of quantum communication arrays, subspace transceivers, and holographic display units that could pick up signals from across the galaxy. Most of the time, they monitored routine traffic, merchant ships, military patrols, and the occasional deep space explorer. "What do you have for me, Lieutenant?" Kim's fingers danced across her controls. "Sir, I've been tracking these signal fragments for the past 72 hours. They're coming from the Vega sector, about 47 light-years from here. I finally managed to piece together a complete transmission." The main holographic display flickered to life, and Park felt his breath catch in his throat. The being on screen was unlike anything he'd ever seen. It stood roughly human height, but was made of what looked like living crystal. Its body was translucent, with veins of light pulsing through its form like a network of fiber optic cables. The creature's face was vaguely humanoid, but elongated, with large eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the universe. Behind the alien, Park could see a cityscape that defied imagination. Towering spires of crystal reached toward the sky, their surfaces reflecting and refracting light in impossible patterns. But something was wrong with the picture. The beautiful structures were cracking, crumbling, and in the distance. Massive dark shapes moved across the horizon like storm clouds made of living shadow. "Please, ... The alien's voice came through the speakers, and Park was struck by how it sounded like wind chimes mixed with breaking glass. "Anyone who receives this message, we are the Valathia Republic. We have lived in peace for 10,000 of your years. We have never harmed another species. We have shared our knowledge freely with all who asked." Transmission quality wavered, and static filled the screen for a moment. When it cleared, the alien was closer to the camera. Park could see tears of liquid light streaming down its crystalline face. "The Devourers have come to our worlds like a plague. They consume everything, our cities, our people, our very essence. 17 of our colonies have already fallen. Our beautiful garden worlds are now nothing but dead rock and ash. Our fleets, ships that took centuries to grow from living crystal, have been destroyed in ours." Park watched in horrified fascination as explosions lit up the sky behind the alien. The camera shook, and debris rained down from above. In the distance, he could see massive organic shapes, things that looked like a cross between spaceships and sea creatures, their surfaces covered in what looked like teeth and tentacles. "Our military commanders are dead. Our government has evacuated to the deep shelters. We estimate we have perhaps days before our homeworld falls. We have sent this message on all known frequencies to every species in the galactic community. We beg any civilized beings for aid. We offer everything we have, our technology, our knowledge, our eternal gratitude. Please, do not let our people become extinct." The transmission cut to static, then looped back to the beginning, mind struggling to process what he'd just witnessed. "How long has this been broadcasting?" he asked quietly. Kim checked her logs. "The complete message started 3 days ago, sir. But I've been picking up fragments for a week. The signal's getting weaker. Either their transmitters are failing, or..." She didn't finish the sentence. Any response from the galactic community? Expression darkened. Yes, sir. The Galactic Council received the transmission and held an emergency session. They voted unanimously to observe the situation from a safe distance. Several member species offered thoughts and prayers. Altarian Empire sent a formal letter of condolence. The Centauri Federation established a refugee fund for survivors, if any. Park felt his jaw tighten. The Galactic Council, a collection of ancient alien civilizations who spent more time talking than acting. Humanity had been trying to gain membership for decades, but they were always told they were too young, too violent, too unpredictable. The Council preferred species that had evolved beyond conflict, who solved problems through discussion and compromise. And us? Park asked, though he already knew the answer. We're not in the Council, sir. Officially, this isn't our problem. Earth's command received a copy of the transmission, but the official response is that we lack sufficient information to make an informed decision about intervention. Park stared at the dying alien on the screen. In those crystal eyes, he saw something he recognized from his own past. The look of someone watching everything they loved turn to ash. He'd seen it in the eyes of colonists on Ceres when pirates had attacked their settlement. He'd seen it in the mirror after the Titan incident, when political delays had cost hundreds of innocent lives. The Velathi's plea continued to loop, each repetition seeming more desperate than the last. These beings had lived in peace for 10 millennia, had shared their knowledge freely, had never harmed anyone. Now they were facing extinction, and the galaxy's response was to form a committee and send greeting cards. Get me Admiral Lee on priority channel, Park ordered. Kim's fingers flew across her console, establishing a quantum-encrypted link to Fleet Command on Luna Base. Within minutes, the holographic display shifted to show Admiral Lee Taman's weathered face. The old man looked like he'd been carved from granite, with scars crossing his features and cybernetic implants where combat injuries had taken their toll. Behind him, Park could see the massive shipyards of Luna Base, where the newest generation of human warships were being constructed around the clock. Ginwu Lee said without preamble, I assume this is about the alien distress call. Yes, sir. They need help. Lee was quiet for a moment, studying Park's face through the quantum link. The Admiral had been fighting humanity's enemies for 30 years, ever since the first alien raiders had tested human resolve in the outer colonies. He'd learned that sometimes the only way to save lives was to take them. The brass is nervous, Lee finally said. We'd be going in blind against an unknown enemy force that managed to destroy an entire interstellar civilization. The Velothi have technology we can barely understand. If something wiped them out that easily, what chance do we have? Park thought about that for a moment. It was a fair point. The Velathi's crystal ships were beautiful, elegant, and probably more advanced than anything humanity had ever built. If the Devourers could destroy them so easily, a human fleet might just be adding to the casualty count. But then he looked at the alien's face again, saw that desperate hope flickering in crystal eyes, and made his decision. With respect, sir, when has that ever stopped us? A rare smile crossed Lee's scarred features. The Admiral had been asking himself the same question for the past 3 days. Humanity had always been the underdog, always been told they were too weak, too primitive, too reckless, to survive in a galaxy full of ancient civilizations. They'd proven the experts wrong every single time. Prep the 7th Fleet, Lee ordered. We launch in 6 hours. The Valathia home system looked like something from a nightmare. What had once been one of the galaxy's most beautiful star systems now resembled a cosmic slaughterhouse. The twin sons of Velar cast their light on a scene of destruction that would haunt any witness for the rest of their lives. Massive, organic ships drifted through space like living asteroids. These weren't the elegant vessels that most galactic civilizations built. They were grotesque things that pulsed with veins of sickly green light. Each bioship was the size of a city, covered in what looked like tumors and breathing holes. Tentacles hundreds of meters long writhed from their holes, reaching out to grab debris and smaller craft before pulling them into gaping maws lined with rows of teeth. The Devourers had turned the entire system into their feeding ground. They moved in swarms, their bioships breeding and multiplying as they consumed everything in their path. Where once there had been trade stations and orbital gardens, now there were only floating chunks of metal and crystal being slowly digested by the alien monsters. On the surface of Velar Prime, the situation was even worse. The crystal cities that had taken the Valathi thousands of years to grow were being devoured in hours. Spires that had reached toward the sky like frozen music were cracking and crumbling as the devourers. Ground forces consumed them from within. Counselor, Zethara huddled in the deep emergency shelters beneath the capital city. Her crystalline body had lost most of its inner light, dimming to a pale gray as despair consumed her people. Around her, other Valathi officials whispered in their harmonic language. Counselor, her aide Veltar approached, with another grim report. The northern spires have fallen. We estimate another 50,000 civilians were lost when the devourers breached the shelter networks. Zethara closed her large eyes. 50,000 more of her people, gone in minutes. The Valathi were not a numerous species they valued. Quality over quantity, taking centuries to mature and reproduce. At this rate, they would be extinct within days. Any response to our distress calls? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Veltar's harmonic voice carried notes of bitter disappointment. The Council species have formally declined to intervene. The Centauri Federation says they need more time to study the threat. Zephyrians have offered to accept refugees, but their own military is too small to mount a rescue operation. Isn't the official reason for abandoning us? They cite the Devourer's rapid reproduction rate as too dangerous for conventional forces. Military analysts from 12 different species have concluded that any rescue attempt would only result in feeding more resources to the enemy. Zethara felt her crystalline form dim even further. The galactic community that had welcomed the Valathi with open arms, that had praised their peaceful nature and shared knowledge, was now abandoning them to die. It was the ultimate betrayal, not from enemies, but from those they had considered friends. The shelter shook as another explosion echoed from above. Through the cameras, Zethara could see Devourer ground forces moving through the streets of her capital city. They looked like a cross between giant insects and sea creatures, with multiple limbs ending in razor-sharp claws. Their bodies were covered in the same sickly green veins as their ships, and their mouths were filled with rows of grinding teeth that could chew through crystal as easily as flesh. "How long do we have?" she asked quietly. "Engineering estimates the shelters can hold for perhaps 2 more days before the Devourers break through. After that, ... Veltar didn't need to finish the sentence. Suddenly, warning alarms began echoing through the shelter. The harmonic tones were different from the usual alerts. These carried notes of confusion and surprise rather than fear. Unknown contacts detected at the system edge. Called out the sensor operator from his crystal console. Multiple large vessels emerging from hyperspace. Zethara looked up with a flicker of hope. Had one of the Council species changed their minds? Were the Altarians finally coming to help? The main display screen flickered to life, showing a view of space near the outer planets. Space itself seemed to be tearing open like fabric, revealing swirling tunnels of energy that hurt to look at directly. From these hyperspace rifts emerged ships unlike anything she had ever seen. Where most galactic civilizations built vessels with smooth, organic curves that flowed like water, these new ships were all sharp angles and brutal efficiency. They looked like they had been designed by someone who understood that space was a hostile environment and had built accordingly. Armor plating covered every surface, and weapon batteries bristled along their holes like the spines of some metal. "Predator," by the light of the first crystal, whispered Veltar. "What are those things?" The sensor operator's harmonics carried notes of disbelief. "I'm scanning their hull configurations. These aren't like any ships in our databases. Energy signatures are completely different from Council technology." More ships continued to emerge from hyperspace. Zethara counted at least 40 vessels, ranging from sleek destroyer-class ships to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed even the largest Devourer bioships. Darkness of space. "Are they another species of Devourers?" asked Veltar nervously. "No," the sensor operator replied, his voice filled with wonder. "They're broadcasting identification codes. Signals are coming from..." "Wait, this can't be right. They're from Earth." The Death World in Sector 7. Zathera felt a chill run through her crystalline body. Every species in the galaxy had heard stories about Earth, the nightmare world where everything was designed to kill anything that lived there. It was a place of constant earthquakes, violent storms, poisonous atmospheres, and predators that made the Devourers look tame by comparison. The beings that had evolved there were said to be monsters themselves, too dangerous to be allowed into civilized space. "But Earth isn't part of the Galactic Council," she said. "Why would they come here?" Before anyone could answer, a transmission crackled through the communications array. The being that appeared on screen made Zathera take an involuntary step backward. It was roughly humanoid in shape, like the Velothi, but everything about it spoke of violence and danger. Its skin was a warm tan color. Most shocking of all was its face. One eye was natural, dark and intense, while the other had been replaced with a cybernetic implant that glowed with red light. More scars crossed its features, and when it spoke, Zathera could see that some of its teeth had been replaced with metal ones. "This is Admiral Lee Taman of the Earth Defense Force," the creature said in a voice that was flat and emotionless, like the sound of grinding metal. "We received your distress call." Zathera found herself stammering, unable to believe what she was hearing. You came. But the council said that intervention was impossible. They said the risk was too great. Human's expression never changed, but something cold and dangerous flickered in its remaining natural eye. "The council talks. We act," in the background of the transmission. Zathera could see other humans moving around what was obviously a military command center. They all had the same dangerous look as their admiral beings who had been forged in the fires of a world that tried to kill them every day of their lives. "But why?" she asked. "We're not part of your alliance. We have no treaties with Earth. You owe us nothing." Admiral Lee was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much death. "Because you asked for help, and we heard you." The transmission shifted to show a tactical display of the Velothi system. Red dots marked the positions of hundreds of Devourer bioships, while blue dots showed the human fleet taking up attack. Positions. "Consular Zathera," Lee continued, "I want you and your people to stay in those shelters. What's about to happen up here isn't going to be pretty. We're going to show these bugs what happens when they threaten innocent people." The transmission ended, leaving the Velothi shelter in stunned silence. Outside, the first explosions of the battle had already begun to light up the sky. The Devourer bioships moved through space like living nightmares from the deepest parts of hell. Each one was over a kilometer long, their hulls covered in what looked like diseased skin that pulsed with veins of sickly green light. They didn't fly so much as swim through the vacuum, their massive tentacles propelling them forward while smaller appendages tasted the space around them for prey. For 10,000 years, these creatures had swept across the galaxy like a plague of locusts. They had consumed entire star systems, turning thriving civilizations into barren wastelands. No species had ever successfully fought them off. The Devourers simply reproduced faster than they could be killed, earning every victory, into a temporary delay at best. Today, they were about to meet something they had never encountered before: humans. Captain Choi Minho stood on the bridge of the UES Iron Fang, watching the tactical display as his destroyer approached the largest concentration of Devourer bioships. The bridge was a masterpiece of human military engineering. Every surface was designed for efficiency and survival. Armor plating covered the walls, blast doors could seal off sections in milliseconds. Emergency systems were built into every corner. Choi himself looked like he had been carved from stone. His face bore the scars of a dozen battles, and his cybernetic left arm moved with mechanical precision as he adjusted the controls. He had been fighting humanity's enemies for 20 years, from pirate raiders in the asteroid belt to alien scouts who thought Earth looked like easy prey. He had never lost a ship, never abandoned a mission, and never left a fellow human behind. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Yoon Hae-jin from the tactical station. "Enemy contact in 30 seconds. I'm counting 312 bioships in the immediate area. with more arriving every minute. The tactical display showed a swarm of red dots converging on the small blue cluster that represented the human fleet. By any reasonable measure, it should have been a massacre. The humans were outnumbered 15-1. Each Devourer bioship was larger than 3 human destroyers combined, but humans had never been reasonable. "Understood," Choi replied, his voice as calm as if he were ordering lunch.
Oh.
He opened a fleet-wide channel, and his words reached every ship in the 7th Fleet. "All ships, weapons free.
Ow.
Show them what a Deathworld breeds."
Yeah.
The first human salvo lit up space like the birth of a new star. Kinetic railguns fired tungsten projectiles accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. These weren't the elegant energy weapons that most galactic civilizations preferred. They were brute force made manifest, designed by a species that understood that sometimes the best solution to a problem was to hit it really hard. The tungsten slugs punched through bioarmor that had shrugged off the sophisticated Pessimo cannons and particle beams of other species. The Devourer's living hulls, which could regenerate from most damage, were simply vaporized by the kinetic impact. Holes the size of subway tunnels appeared in bioships, and green ichors sprayed into the vacuum of space. Following the railgun barrage came the plasma torpedoes, each one carrying the destructive power of a small nuclear weapon. They burrowed deep into Devourer holes before detonating, turning the creature's own mass against them. Bioships that had survived the impacts of asteroids were blown apart from within, their dying screams echoing across subspace frequencies. The Devourers retaliated with everything they had. Bioacid projectiles that could dissolve most metals splashed harmlessly against human armor designed to withstand the corrosive atmosphere of Venus. Living missiles that tried to latch onto enemy ships found themselves unable to penetrate hulls. Built to survive in the crushing depths of Earth's oceans. "Direct hit on Section C7, reported Sergeant Park Eugene from Damage Control. His voice carried the calm professionalism of someone who had trained for this exact scenario 1,000 times. "Hull breach sealed automatically. No casualties. Repair drones are already patching the outer plating." Devourers had never faced enemies like this before. Their usual tactics of overwhelming numbers and biological warfare were useless against beings who had evolved on a world where survival meant adapting to every possible threat. Where other species built ships to explore the cosmos, humans built them to survive the cosmos. Captain Choi watched the battle unfold on his tactical display, then made a decision that would have horrified any other species in the galaxy. He opened a channel to the Marine Bay. "Major Kim, you're cleared for boarding operations." In the Marine Bay, Major Kim Dong-han smiled inside his powered armor. The expression would have terrified any alien who saw it, the smile of a predator who had just spotted prey. Around him, 50 other Marines were suiting up in powered armor that was more like wearing a tank than clothing. Each suit was 2 meters of ceramicrete plating, servo-assisted muscles, and enough firepower to level a city block. The Marines. Inside were humans who had volunteered for the most dangerous job in the most dangerous military in the galaxy. Boarding enemy ships in the middle of space battles. "Listen up, people," Kim called out over the squad. "Come." His voice carried the authority of someone who had led men through hell and brought them back alive. "These things have been eating civilizations for breakfast for 10,000 years. Today, they're going to learn what happens when they bite off more than they can chew." The Marines checked their weapons with the casual efficiency of apex predators. Assault rifles that fired explosive rounds capable of penetrating tank armor. Plasma cutters that could slice through starship hulls. Monomolecular combat knives that could cut through almost anything at the atomic level. And most importantly, the absolute certainty that they were the most dangerous things in this star system. "Boarding pods loaded and ready," reported the launch officer. "Launch," Kim ordered. The boarding pods shot out of the Iron Fang like bullets. From a gun, crossing the space between ships in seconds, they punched through the Devourer bioholes with shaped charges, creating temporary holes that the pods could pass through before the living ships could heal themselves. Inside the bioship, Kim and his squad found themselves in what looked like the inside of a giant creature, because that's exactly what it was. The corridors pulsed like arteries. The walls were covered in what looked like scales. Everything was lit by the same sickly green light that covered the ship's exterior. "Movement ahead," reported Corporal Lee Sang-wook, his rifle trained. On the corridor ahead, the first devourer to appear around the corner was a nightmare made flesh. 3 meters tall, it looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a shark and given it acid for blood. Its multiple arms ended in claws that could cut through steel, and its mouth was filled with rows of grinding teeth that could chew through almost anything. It lasted exactly 0.3 seconds against human firepower. Kim's assault rifle fired explosive rounds at full automatic, turning the creature into green paste that splattered across the corridor walls. More devourers appeared, swarming the humans in the cramped passages with the fury of a disturbed hive. They died by the dozens. Human reflexes, honed by evolution on a world where everything was trying to kill them, proved superior to hive mind. Coordination. Where other species might have been overwhelmed by the sheer numbers, humans had trained for exactly this scenario. They moved as a unit, covering each other's backs, using the corridor's narrow confines to limit how many enemies could attack at once. "Hive node located," Lee reported over the comm as they fought their way deeper into the ship. "Planting charges now." The explosion that followed sent shockwaves through the bioship's nervous system. The vessel went into convulsions as its hive mind connection was severed, and smaller organisms throughout the ship began dying as their central coordination was destroyed. Across the battlefield, similar scenes were playing out. Human marines carved through the devourers like a hot knife through butter, while human ships used tactics that ranged from brilliant to completely insane. Some captains rammed their ships directly into bioship weak points. Others used their ship's powerful engines to literally cook their enemies with fusion fire. The devourers had never faced an enemy like this, beings who not only refused to be consumed, but who seemed to actually enjoy fighting back. Deep in the heart of the devourer swarm, something ancient and malevolent stirred. The queen form was not like the other creatures in her hive. She was massive beyond imagination. Her bioship the size of a small moon. For 10,000 years she had drifted through the galaxy like a living plague, her consciousness touching every devourer across dozens of star systems. She had consumed the proud warrior clans of the Vorthan Empire, turning their battle fleets into food for her children. She had devoured the peaceful garden worlds of the Vessian Republic, their billion-year-old forests becoming nothing but fuel for her endless hunger. Entire species had gone extinct at her command, their final moments of terror feeding her psychic appetite as much as their flesh fed her physical form. The queen form had never known defeat. Her children were countless, her hunger was infinite, and her patience was eternal. When one feeding ground was exhausted, she simply moved to the next. The galaxy was vast, and there were always more civilizations to consume. But today, something was different. Her children were dying in numbers she had never experienced before. The small, violent creatures from the third planet of an unremarkable star system were fighting back with a ferocity that defied all logic. Instead of fleeing in terror like every other species, these humans seemed to become more dangerous the longer the battle continued. Through her psychic connection to the hive mind, she felt each death of her children like a small wound. The pain was starting to add up, and for the first time in millennia, the queen form experienced something approaching concern. On the bridge of the UES Thunderstrike, Admiral Lee Taman watched the tactical display with growing frustration. The human fleet had performed magnificently. They had destroyed nearly half of the Devourer bioships in the immediate area, rescued thousands of Valathi civilians from the planet's surface, and proven that the supposedly invincible swarm could be beaten, but it wasn't enough. Admiral reported Commander Park Jin-woo from the tactical station, his voice tight with exhaustion. They had been fighting for 18 straight hours, and the crew was running on stimulants and pure adrenaline. We've eliminated roughly 40% of their fleet, but the situation is getting worse. Lee studied the display, watching as new red dots appeared even as old ones vanished. Explain. The Devourers are pulling back to their breeding stations. those massive biofactories near the gas giant. Our scouts report they're producing new bioships every 3 hours. At this rate, they'll replace their losses faster than we can inflict them. The Admiral's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on the distant structures. The breeding stations were obscene things, living factories, size of asteroids that consumed raw matter and excreted fully formed bioships. They were protected by the largest concentration of devourer forces in the system. Conventional tactics would require months of siege warfare to reduce them. The Velothi didn't have months. They had maybe days before the last of their people were consumed. Lee had spent his entire career fighting impossible odds. He had learned that sometimes, when conventional tactics failed, you had to do something so crazy that the enemy couldn't predict it, something so reckless that no sane commander would even consider it. Fortunately, Admiral Lee Taman had never been accused of being entirely sane. "Signal the fleet," he ordered, his voice carrying the calm authority of a man who had just made an irreversible decision. "Implement Protocol Omega." Every officer on the bridge turned to stare at him. Park's face went pale. "Sir, are you absolutely sure about this?" Protocol Omega existed in the Earth Defense Force Tactical Manual as a theoretical last resort. It had never been used in actual combat because it was considered too reckless even by human standards. The protocol called for the entire fleet to ram enemy targets at maximum velocity. With crews evacuating in escape pods at the last possible second, it was suicide disguised as tactics. And it required a level of coordination and timing that bordered on the impossible. "The Velothi are dying while we debate tactics," Lee said quietly. "Every minute we wait, more innocent people are consumed by these monsters. Execute the order." Across the human fleet, alarms began sounding as crews received their final orders. In engineering sections throughout the ships, human technicians began overriding safety protocols and pushing fusion reactors beyond their design limits. In pilot-ready rooms, evacuation procedures were reviewed one last time. On the Thunderstrike, Commander Park approached his admiral with an expression of barely controlled emotion. "Sir, your escape pod is loaded and ready. The crew is assembled at evacuation stations." Lee shook his head. "Negative. Someone needs to ensure we hit the primary breeding node. The Queen Form's command ship is integrated with that structure. If we miss, this whole operation fails." Park understood immediately. The Thunderstrike was the flagship, the most heavily armed and armored vessel in the fleet. If any ship could punch through the Queen Form's defenses, it would be this one. But it would require manual control, right? "Up to the moment of impact. Double quote, sir, I can't allow you to do this. Fleet needs you." "The fleet needs results, Commander. Sometimes getting results requires sacrifices." The scarred face was carved from stone. "Get to your pod. That's an order." Park stood at attention and saluted. "It's been an honor serving with you." "Admiral, the honor was mine. Now go save some lives." As the crew evacuated, Admiral Lee Taman stood alone on the bridge of the Thunderstrike. Round him, automated systems began the final approach to the Devourer breeding stations. The ship's engines pushed beyond their safety limits, accelerating the 50,000-ton warship to a significant fraction of light speed. On the screens, he could see the Queen Form's massive bioship embedded in the largest breeding station. The creature was truly enormous. Her tentacles alone were longer than most starships, and her main body was covered in weapon emplacements and defensive systems that had been grown rather than built. She was ancient, powerful, and utterly without mercy. She had consumed civilizations that had existed for millions of years, turning their accumulated knowledge and culture into food for her endless hunger. Today, she was going to learn what happened when you threatened something a human cared about. Thunderstrike struck the breeding station like the fist of an angry god. The kinetic energy released by the impact was equivalent to several nuclear weapons detonating simultaneously. The Queen Form's bioship, which had survived meteor impacts and stellar radiation for 10,000 years, was torn apart in seconds. Explosion was visible from 3 star systems away, a brief new star that burned brighter than the system's twin suns before, fading into nothing. But it was the psychic shriek that followed that truly marked the end of the Devourer threat. The Queen Form's death scream echoed across subspace frequencies, reaching every telepathic species within 50 light-years. It was the sound of something ancient and evil finally meeting its match, a howl of rage, pain, and disbelief that this was how her 10,000-year reign would end. The hive mind that had connected millions of bioships across dozens of star systems collapsed in an instant. Without their Queen Form's guidance, the individual devourers reverted to basic survival instincts. The complex coordination that had made them such an effective swarm dissolved into chaos. Captain Jung Subin watched the aftermath from her rescue shuttle, her heart heavy with grief for her fallen admiral. Around her, the surviving human fleet regrouped as devourer bioships began fleeing in all directions. All ships, she broadcast on the fleet frequency, pursue and destroy. No survivors. These things have killed billions of innocent people across the galaxy. They don't get to escape and do it again somewhere else. The hunt that followed would become legend throughout the galaxy. Human ships, fueled by righteous anger and superior technology, tracked down every fleeing bioship. The devourers, without their hive mind coordination, fell one by one to human firepower. By the time the sun set on Velar Prime, the ancient plague that had terrorized the galaxy for 10 millennia was finally extinct. 3 months had passed since. The Battle of Velar Prime, and the galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened. The Devourers, an ancient plague that had consumed civilizations for 10,000 years, were gone, completely extinct. Not scattered or driven into hiding, but truly and utterly destroyed by a species that most of the galaxy had never even heard of. Captain Jang Suben stood in the crystal halls of New Villar, the emergency capital the Valathi had built on their moon, while their home world slowly healed from the Devourer attack. The building around her was a masterpiece of alien architecture, with walls that seemed to be grown rather than built, refracting light into patterns that told stories of Valathi, history, and culture. Around her, the survivors of the 7th Fleet stood at attention in their dress uniforms. These men and women had fought through hell and come out the other side, but they still looked uncomfortable being the center of so much attention. Humans had never been good at ceremonies. They preferred action to speeches, results to recognition. The ceremony itself was unlike anything in human experience. The Valathi had no concept of military parades or medal ceremonies. Instead, they had created something that was part concert, part light show, and part religious experience. Their voices harmonized in frequencies that made the crystal walls resonate with music that could be felt as much as heard. Counselor Zathera approached Captain Jang, her crystalline form now glowing with health as her people began to rebuild their shattered civilization. The Valathi leader had changed dramatically since that desperate transmission 3 months ago. Where once her inner light had dimmed to almost nothing, now she blazed with renewed purpose and hope. "Captain Jang," she said, her voice creating harmonies that spoke of gratitude beyond words. "On behalf of the Valathi Republic and all our surviving people, I present you with the Crystal of Eternal Light, our highest honor, given only to those who have saved our entire species from extinction." The award itself was breathtaking, a crystal formation that seemed to contain its own miniature star, pulsing with light that shifted through every color imaginable. It was said that each crystal of eternal light took a century to grow, and only 17 had ever been created in Valathi history. Jang accepted the award with characteristic human stoicism, her scarred face showing little emotion. "We did what anyone should do when innocent people are threatened. But you are the only ones who did it," Zathera replied, her harmonics carrying notes of wonder and disbelief. "The Galactic Council spent weeks debating while our people died. You heard our call and acted within hours, traveling across the galaxy to help complete strangers." It was true, and everyone in the hall knew it. The response from the so-called civilized galaxy had been pathetic. Ancient species with technology beyond human understanding had chosen to debate and discuss while an entire civilization faced extinction. Only the humans, the primitive Deathworlders, from an insignificant backwater system, had been willing to risk everything for people they had never met. A new voice interrupted the ceremony. speaking in the universal trade language with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, which is exactly why we need to talk. The crowd parted as Ambassador Krelinoth of the Galactic Council approached with his full diplomatic entourage. The tall, gray-skinned alien was an imposing figure over 2.5 meters tall, with large black eyes that seemed to take in everything. He had traveled personally from the Council homeworld of Centralis, something that hadn't happened in over a century. Behind him walked representatives from a dozen different species, each one a member of the inner circle that effectively ruled galactic civilization. There were the ethereal Zephyrians with their translucent bodies and 6 arms, the massive, rock-like Terrans whose homeworld had gravity 3 times that of Earth, and the energy beings known as the Luminari who existed as patterns of living light. Humans of Earth, Krelinoth began with formal diplomatic protocol. The Galactic Council has spent considerable time reviewing your military intervention against the Devourer threat. Sergeant Park Yujin, standing in formation with the other, Moraines muttered under his breath, just loud enough for his squad to hear, "Here it comes." The lecture about unauthorized military action and violation of galactic sovereignty. The humans had been expecting this. For 3 months, they had been waiting for the Council to express their displeasure at Earth's unilateral action. There would probably be sanctions, trade restrictions, maybe even a formal censure for acting without permission. But Krelinoth surprised everyone in the hall. After extensive deliberation, we would like to offer humanity full membership in the SE Galactic Council, with a permanent seat on the Security Committee and full voting rights on all matters of galactic importance. The silence that followed was deafening. The humans stared at the ambassador in shock. While the Velothi looked confused by the sudden shift in the political landscape, they thought they understood Captain. Captain Zhang was the first to recover her voice. "Ambassador, we appreciate the offer, but we have to ask, what's the catch?" Krelinoth's expression remained neutral, but something in his large black eyes suggested he had expected this question. "No catch, Captain, only a request." "Which is?" "The galaxy is vast and ancient, containing threats that most species prefer not to acknowledge. The Devourers were only one example. There are others, rogue artificial intelligences from dead civilizations, interdimensional parasites that feed on entire star systems, ancient weapons left behind by extinct races. Threats that the Council cannot officially acknowledge or deal with through conventional diplomatic channels." The ambassador paused, looking directly at Zhang. "We need someone willing to do what must be done when civilization itself is at stake. Someone who doesn't spend months debating when action is required." Zhang smiled grimly, understanding exactly what the Council was really asking for. "You want us to be your attack dogs? We prefer to think of you as our guardians," Krelinoth replied diplomatically. "The Velothi are not the only species in the galaxy facing potential extinction, but they are the first to be saved by what you might call unconventional methods." Over the following weeks, the political landscape of the galaxy shifted dramatically. Human colonies began appearing throughout the former Devourer territory, providing bases for Earth's expanding fleet. Human shipyards started construction on a new generation of warships designed specifically for deep space patrol and rapid response. The Earth Defense Force took up permanent patrol routes along the galactic rim, where the most dangerous threats traditionally emerged from the dark spaces between galaxies. And whenever a desperate transmission echoed across the void, a cry for help from the innocent and defenseless facing extinction, humanity answered. The galaxy's opinion of humans changed almost overnight, where once they had been dismissed as primitive barbarians from a backwater death world. Now they were recognized as the most effective military force in known space. Species that had previously refused to acknowledge Earth's existence suddenly found themselves eager to establish diplomatic relations and trade agreements. But the humans remained characteristically modest about their new status. They'd built their colonies not as conquerors, but as protectors. Their fleets patrolled not to intimidate, but to defend. And when grateful alien species offered them tribute and honors, They politely declined, insisting that seeing justice done was payment enough. In the Crystal Archives of New Vieler, Counselor Zathera made the final entry. In the official record of the Devourer War, her words were preserved in harmonics that would resonate through the crystal matrix for thousands of years, ensuring that future generations would never forget what had happened. When civilization failed us, when hope died and all seemed lost, the Deathworlders came. They asked for nothing, demanded no payment, but sacrificed everything to save strangers they had never met. They proved that strength without compassion is mere brutality, but compassion without strength is merely good intentions. May their fleet forever sail between the stars, guardians of the innocent, destroyers of evil, protectors of all who cannot protect themselves. This is our eternal debt to the humans of Earth, a debt that can never be fully repaid, but which we will spend eternity trying to honor. The Velothi would indeed spend the next 1,000 years working to repay that debt, becoming humanity's closest allies, and helping to spread human ideals of justice and protection throughout the galaxy, and in the depths of space, where ancient evils stirred in the darkness between stars. New threats began to take notice of the species that had destroyed the Devourers. They would learn, as the galaxy already had, that while humans might come from a death world, they were not the monsters. They were the ones who killed the monsters. The end.